Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the PGA Draft Cast, brought to you by WinDailySports.com. Just a quick reminder that Win Daily Sports doesn't just cover golf. They cover the NFL, the NHL, MLB, NBA, soccer, MMA, NASCAR, you name the sport. Win Daily Sports has projection models, optimizers, articles, and our famous Discord chat to cover it all. Now, if you click the promo link below and you type in Win Big or Green, you will get 1 week free of Win Daily. And then after that, it is just $5.99 per week for all of that, including some of our betting content. Now, let's get to the PGA Draft Cast, where we have proven track records with Joel, Spencer, David, and myself. Let's have some fun. Get in the chat. Make sure you subscribe to the page, and make sure you hit the like button. Let's do this snake draft. Let's do the PGA Draft Cast. Let's do it right now.
PGA Nation, we are back, and we are coming off another hot major week. A ton of fun last week was. It lived up to the hype. The course was cool. I disagree with the haters online about the day one. They were saying it was too easy. We came around to it. Obviously, it wasn't as easy as it was day one throughout the rest of the weekend. It was a really exciting finish. Wyndham Clark played. I was telling my dad, he really won the tournament. There was a lot of times down the stretch he could have blown it, and he went out and made great shot after great shot and won the tournament. He deserves it. He played great. Of course, our very own tipped him off, David Bialeski. Another hot streak he is on, dipping off two above 66 to 1, 61 and 75 to 1 back-to-back weeks, which is absolutely outstanding. I, of course, almost took down the Millie Maker, got fourth place, was very close. The only difference between my lineup and the Millie Maker winner was Bryson DeChambeau and Harris English. So it was a successful week, but we got another one coming right up here at the Travelers. We're heading out to Connecticut. This is a pretty fun, interesting course, at least to handicap from that perspective. TPC River Highlands, we've seen some results here before. One of my the two biggest factors for me are driving accuracy. We want guys that are going to be in fairways, and I like course history here. I mean, it does kind of be a little bit showing if you've had success here in the past, there's a good chance that you might find success here again. The biggest thing I'm leaning on this week is what's different from major week is that you can't really dip down too far into the 6K range in major weeks because those guys just typically don't rise to the top of the leaderboard. Whereas I think there are some interesting, cheaper options this week that we might be able to get to. But I digress. Before we dive in, see, how are you doing tonight?
Well, I'm good, but I'm just not sure if Spencer's doing well because he had Wyndham Clark last week too, and you completely left him out of the conversation. Spencer, are you okay?
No, I mean, that's like stabbing me in the back in the first 5 minutes of the show.
Unbelievable.
Well, I came in and I looked at the draft order and I wasn't first, so I ignored you, Spencer, for the remainder of this show.
Hey, I will say this, though, Spencer, before you talk about that, listen, we've been kind of on fire. On this show, too, our lineups, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, our lineups were all really good. And again, I think that sort of plays well to what this show is. For those of you that are listening, for those of you that are new, because it's a snake draft and because if a chalky guy gets taken, the other three can't take them, it just promotes a sort of team roster construction that's going to be different than your regular roster construction if you're just sitting on your phone drafting your lineup. So keep that in mind when you're watching the Draftcast. Like, you get some unique lineups here, and unique lineups are probably what would have gotten you to the pay window last week in DFS. So it's just something to consider. But I'm doing well. I'm glad everybody, listen, Spencer, you've been great in DFS, and then you hit the Wyndham Clark 100 to 1. David Bialeski hits the Wyndham Clark after hitting Nick Taylor at 66 to 1. I hit a first round leader in Xander Schauffele. We're all just kind of crushing it right now. And Joel, it's funny, Joel, you were almost a millionaire. You were in fourth in the Millie Maker, as you said. And I was about to come on this show and lament the fact that I won some money last week in DFS, but I would have won like $600 to $800 more if Rickie Fowler didn't just continuously bogey, including the last putt cost me like $600, the last bogey on 18. And I was just going to be like, the guy that's like bitching about that. Meanwhile, you were like literally 4 points away from being you're probably already a millionaire with all your other wins, but let's not get into that. But you were super close, man. It's not the first time you've been super close. So that's really cool.
Yeah, it was definitely an exciting finish. there's a learnings, right? Especially when what tournaments you play, how you attack them. For me, like this week, my lineup was pretty popular. I mean, it was tied with a few people. A lot of people played it, but that doesn't mean like it was good. It was the guys that played really well. And so that doesn't mean you want to get scared off from playing those good players because they were popular, right? I think especially more so in majors when we know the kind of creme rise to the top and you kind of have to – there's only certain many guys that I think are playable in these events.
Yeah.
So that happened. I'm happy with how it came out, my strategy. Hopefully one day soon I'll be able to actually take one down. Spence, how you feeling tonight?
I'm doing well, and kind of as Sia was saying, and we've talked about at the beginning of the show, like the lineups were really good last week. You get one of those weird things to where there's certain players, like if you look at my lineup specifically, Rory, Scheffler, Wyndham, I was going to take Rickie Fowler also, and all of a sudden there's the top four there. And then legitimately you have a chance, like that lineup could have won the Millionaire Maker if things go right in that portion of it. But David was 6-6 on his lineup. Some guy named Draft Master Flex, I think that's his name. He was also 6-6 with his lineup. So there was a lot of good on this show with the picks that we made.
Yeah, and we've said this before. We're ready it again. You do tend to get in a hot streak where the guys that you like, the guys that you're seeing over a course of a period are continually showing up, and we're in that right now. The hot streak's on. It's time to ride it, make some money with us. We're not going to make you wait too long. Let's get right into it. Let's first hear Spence, the course breakdown this week. We've seen some tournaments here. It is a pretty unique course from a betting and breakdown standpoint. So tell us what you're looking for this week.
I think there's more ways that you can look at this course than I guess some people would give an answer to for it. So you look at the yardage on the scorecard, 6,841 yards, give or take, par 70. You get this mixed texture on these greens. On the surface, I think anytime that you get a measurement that's small and you get these smaller than average greens, that would tell a story of short game prowess and mid-iron play coming to the forefront of the discussion. I do think that will be important when traversing the data. Although the one thing that really caught my eye is that the off the tee metrics were actually the ones that took center stage in the increase that they received from a regular stop on tour. 15.3% to 18.3% was the difference in the dispersion of scoring. I think you can make an argument of how you want to go about this. I think accuracy is important. Anytime you have these tree line, strategical, peat dye courses, you obviously want to be in the fairway. I think like if you're wayward and all of a sudden you're in like the trees, you have a problem here. But we've seen players with distance find success. I think if you can be long and straight, that is a really advantageous way to get yourself into these shorter looks into these greens. But it kind of goes back to any of these shorter venues. Like even if your distance declined on the scale, you can still take advantage of the course if your mid-iron statistics pop over 4 rounds. And then that's obviously going to go with the ability that you're locating a lot of fairways. So that's players like Russell Henley and Brian Harmon. And, those are the golfers that see a boost here that might not necessarily at a course that's longer.
So to recap, we want guys who are long, straight, and get it in the hole in less swings.
Pretty much.
Okay. All right. That's a good recap. All right. Well, without further ado, let's dive into the draft. The order tonight, I'm going to pull up the draft board while I'm doing so. The order tonight is going to be Spence as a reward for me not giving him his cookies for his great outright hit this week. I am going second, Sia third. Audience, you will be going fourth. As always, you get the snake wrap where you get 2 in a row. If you are new tonight, which most of you I'm sure have seen the show before, but in case you have not, the way it works is you do have to pick a real DraftKings lineup. So what that means is you cannot just pick all the best players. You have to draft in a way that ensures that you can actually afford the lineup on DraftKings. Without further ado, Spence, you're on the clock.
So I will say, Joel, I did earn this one myself here. There's a lot of wins that you've had recently, but it felt nice to get back into the winner's circle. Being in this number 1 spot is, I think, the advantageous way that you want to be on this show. I think that like when you had your run, Joel, and when I had my run, like when you get the start lineups the way that you want, there's a big advantage here when players get taken off the board. And there's one golfer for me, and I kind of have made this argument from the very start of this week on any podcast or article that I've written that I think is arguably the best player in this tournament for this course. And that's not even necessarily Scottie Scheffler here. I love the way that Patrick Cantlay sets up for this venue. Number 1 in my model for total driving. He's number 2 for me in the strokes gained putting on this specific surface. That's something that Scotty has not been able to add recently. Obviously, the tee to green numbers that he's put together are Tiger Woods-like, but one of the things that I love about Cantlay, beyond anything else, it comes down to his proximity numbers. That's been somewhere he has struggled. It's kind of been hit and miss for him in some of these spots. I think when you put him at this specific course here, he sees a 23 spot increase in my model when looking at the weighted proximity for TPC River Highlands versus any generic course on tour. 5 consecutive top 15 finishes. I think the safety's there, the upside's there. And the one thing I want to note for anybody out there that's like, oh, well, he hasn't necessarily provided a top 10 in any of those finishes. If you look at what he did last year, he was the overnight leader going into Saturday before he shot a terrible 76 to plummet himself down the leaderboard there. So I think Cantlay has legitimate win equity, legitimate safety. And for me, he's the safest route to start lineups at his price tag.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a problem with that pick. It's funny though, what Spencer sort of noted with listen, 5 in a row at top 15s here. But then it begs the question, well, it's Patrick Cantlay. So is it elite to have 5 in a row top 15s if none of them are top 10s? But you know what? To your point, Spencer, I'm not so sure it matters. When we actually consider the margins between typically, I mean, listen, 15th isn't great for a Patrick Cantlay, but the margins between 11th and 3rd are usually a back 9 on Sunday. And so it's just one of those things where you could make the argument if you wanted to that that means Cantlay can't close, but he's kind of proven he can close in the past. So I don't mind the pick. If I was in the first overall pick, Joel, I wanted to ask you, well, it's your pick. So before, instead of just giving my opinion, why don't you give us your pick and tell us whether you would have taken Cantlay ahead of the person you're taking now?
I wouldn't have. I can't believe that you didn't just give me the first pick because you knew who I was going to take.
It's Scotty.
Yeah, I'm going to take has top 5 finishes in a row on the PGA Tour this year, and he's just playing so well. If he makes a few putts, he's going to win the tournament. And his ball striking tee to green numbers, like you said, they're Tiger Woods-esque. They're so absurd right now. Worst case scenario is what? Okay, fine. Maybe he gets 8th, but in in a small field in a 4-person cash game type of style, that's going to be great. That's going to be good. I almost can't see a scenario where Scotty Schauffele does not help your lineup this week.
Yeah, it's interesting because, it's so discouraging watching Scotty Scheffler putt sometimes. You watch him, particularly on the back 9, where he was really being featured because he was kind of, in the conversation among Rickie, Wyndham, and Rory at the U.S. Open. And every putt was not close. I honestly think the 3 of us could have potentially putted at least similarly to Scheffler down the stretch of that tournament. I know that sounds ridiculous to people, but the putts were pretty bad. But to your point, he doesn't always putt bad. And his ball striking is always good. Tee to green, he is a monster. I wonder, Spencer, do you think that's going to regress anytime soon? This is an impossible question. Or do you think we can just kind of count on Scotty being this tee to green monster?
When I say it's Tiger Woods-esque, I'm legitimately meaning that this is top 5 historical production from a tee to green perspective of what he's putting together. Naturally, he has to regress at some point. It doesn't mean that he's going to regress for this contest, but nobody, not even Tiger Woods was this level of sustain, and Tiger Woods is the greatest golfer ever. It has to come back ever so slightly for him. I obviously worry about the flat stick. It's been so bad here all the time, and I don't think he's necessarily going to burn lineups to the ground. He's not doing that. He's top 15 of every single tournament that he plays, but I know he's going to be popular. I know he's the most expensive player on the board. I do believe that there's a legitimate opportunity to try to play other players around him. And Cantlay's not the only answer to that. There's other golfers on this board that I find to be unique contrarian pivots to consider also. But I mean, at some point you have to worry that does Scheffler just mentally combust that he could have won every single tournament this year if he was just a neutral putter. It's historic what he's putting together. You have to worry at some point, he mentally falls apart.
Yeah, although he isn't really like, he seems like the personality type that like doesn't fall apart. Like he's so nonchalant after every shot. He's just like it's a walk in the park for him. But I agree with you. At some point, the tee to green is going to regress. It kind of has to. You just wonder if and when that happens, does the putter actually sort of fix itself? Because if that's the case, then he's really going to go on a dominant streak here. So Spencer, you mentioned some of the guys in audience. You can start nominating right now because I'll go ahead and give my pick out. You mentioned some of the guys that you like maybe in the Patrick Cantlay ilk. So I'm going to go to you after I make this pick just to see if maybe this was one of the guys on your radar. Maybe not. But I'm going to go with Viktor Hovland at 9,900. The approach play has been a little spotty over the last couple of tournaments, but Viktor Hovland's a superstar at this point. I think we can count on ball striking for him more often than not. Off the tee's been good. The putter's actually been really good. And the short game hasn't been bad either. He just seems like a pretty good course fit here. I think he's going to keep it in the fairway. I think he is going to be dialed in on his approaches. And if the putter stays hot, I'm going to be very happy with this pick. I'll note he's played here twice. And the latest time he played in 2019, but in 2020, he was T11. But he led the field tee to green that year. He lost 3.3 strokes with the putter. So I think it just lends itself to why I think he's such a good course fit, other than the obvious, because he's done it here before as well, tee to green. So I'm a fan of Viktor Hovland. We know he can close. We're talking about closing with Patrick Cantlay, and I'm sure we'll talk about that if Rory comes up and Xander Schauffele. Viktor Hovland just closed at the Memorial. I mean, it was just a few weeks ago. So I think he's in a nice little zone right now. I don't think we're getting a discount at 9,900, but I'll say this. It looks like we're getting an ownership discount to some degree. And we'll wait for Stephen Pilardi's article, Sicily Kid, who's in the chat right now. That's going to come out tomorrow, but I don't think Viktor Hovland's going to have super high ownership. I think he's going to be lower than most of the people above him and a few of the people below him. So that's what I'm going with. Audience, if you already have your two guys, go ahead and put them in the chat. But Spencer, I want to go to you. How are you feeling about Viktor Hovland this week?
See, we're splitting hairs here when we're talking about Viktor Hovland and up. Those 6 golfers are within the top 6 of my model in every single iteration of how I ran things. I like what you said about the ownership discount that I think that you're going to get also. That was not the golfer I was talking about to the one that I think is an interesting pivot away from Scottie Scheffler. But I have absolutely no issues with Hovland. And the other thing that I will add to it, he sees positive upside on these specific green types. And this is a golfer that his putting has already looked great over these past couple months. All of a sudden now you put him on a green complex that he might even like more. Like, that's how you take a ball striker who's one of the best ball strikers in the world, and then he makes a few more putts than he normally makes. That's the recipe for how you win a golf tournament.
Yeah. Joel, your thoughts on Hovland? Is he in or out, or your player pool?
In. I like Hovland a lot this week. The one small concern would be that this is a challenging course around the green, and that's been his biggest weakness. But he's shown a lot of improvement in that recently, and if that's something that he can show he sustained, then he might just end up being one of the next big 4 or 5 guys that's just consistently in the top 10 every week. And he's starting to show that this year, and I think that continues. So I like the pick, especially under 10K.
All right. Well, we've got the 2 picks from the audience already. Byron has some commentary, at least about one of them, because one of them is very chalky. But listen, he's a good pick, at least just on the surface. And I'm going to start with Russell Henley there. The second one is Hideki Matsuyama. So I'll just say a couple words about each of them, and then I'll kick it to you guys before I give my next pick. But Russell Henley obviously grades out really, really well. I mean, it's just, whether you're looking at tee to green or approach, even off the tee, he just checks every box. And we see that with the metrics, but the finishing positions are there too. So he's going to be one of the most popular guys on the slate. He's 7,800, which means he's in the 7K range. And we know that 7K chalk typically fails. It's the Win Daily Sports. If you're in our Discord, and if you were in our Discord 4 or 5 years ago, we called it Rule 17 for no particular reason whatsoever. And it's just that 7K chalk. You want to be really, really careful about it. You want to make sure that there's no pivots around that you don't want to go to, because listen, Justin Rose last week, I was guilty of it too. I liked Justin Rose last week too. What was he, 7,700 instead of 78? Low 7K range, Mito Pereira. I liked him too. I played him a little bit too. He missed the cut like on the number. So did Rose, by the way, or maybe actually Rose by 2 strokes when it was all said and done. But the point is, just be really careful when you play them in tournaments. Hideki I like for a couple reasons. One is because he rates out really well, great on approach. The ball striking, all of it has really been coming back over the last few tournaments. I guess he's shaking off that neck injury. And also 8,600 is really low for him, but the ownership isn't super high on him. So I feel like, I thought he would be closer to like 18, 19%. What I'm looking at right now, and it's still relatively early, is around 13, 14%, which I think is totally reasonable for Hideki. So, Joel, I want to go to you first. Are you on either of these two guys, and are you afraid of the Russell Henley ownership?
No. I like both plays. I think Hideki at 8,600 has upside, as a good alternative to some of these guys in the 9, 10K range with equal upside. And Henley, the ownership is not ideal, but the results are there. And like, you need to find 7K value. And he seems like a really good fit in the 7K range to give you value. The only counter to that I will say is there are some other guys in the 7K range, like last week, that I also like. And if all things are relatively equal, then yes, I will choose ownership and go somewhere else. But I'm also going to have some shares of Henley this week as well.
Joel, yes or no on each before I give my pick out?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Spencer, yes or no on each? My bad.
Probably, definitely yes to Hideki, but probably yes to Russell Henley also. Like, I know at some point the ownership has to come into play and it matters. And maybe from specific builds, you don't want to have if it gets too chalky in certain areas, and in different contests, you might not want to have him. But like, he's 10th for me in my model this week. You don't really see that big of deviations for Russell Henley. It really liked him last week for the US Open. I think this is a better course fit for him for all the obvious accuracy reasons. I'm not guaranteed to play him, but I'm not going to talk anybody out of him either, because I think I can understand why everybody wants to go that direction. He's the most mispriced player in my model of like that 7,800 and up territory that we're talking about this week, which is a very similar answer that I would have given for Rickie Fowler last week. Like, they're just mispriced players.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's absolutely true. So just consider it. Listen, we had Degenerate 75 on this show. What was it, 2 weeks ago? Was it for the Memorial? I'm trying to remember. Was that when we had him on, when the Victor Hovland? I'm not sure. But the point is, he'll always say on his show, whether it's the Showdown, Hoedown, or whatever it is, like, you can play chalk. Just know what you're doing when you're playing chalk and make sure you're at least getting to, he would probably say don't play Russell Henley, but I'm sure, I know he plays chalk too. And it's just one of the, and I'm only deferring to him because he was just on this show and he talks about, chalk quite a bit. You can play chalk sometimes. Just make sure you're different in other places, because 30% of the field is probably going to be going with you on Russell Henley. All right, so I'm going to do something a little different. I thought I was going to go with like an upper crust player, a 10K or above player. I'm going to stay in the 9K range, and I'm going to go with the guy that splashed onto the scene with Victor Hovland and Matthew Wolff, remember him? And it's going to be Collin Morikawa. Collin Morikawa at 9,500. I don't think I'm getting a steal necessarily from a price standpoint, but I do think we're getting Collin Morikawa on the upswing in a pretty big way. And I could be wrong. It's a small sample size, but it does appear that the ball striking and the approach and all of those things that seem to be somewhat broken are back for Collin Morikawa. And if he can get hot with the putter, which at the Travelers, there have been some bad putters that have gotten hot here. I think this is a nice start for me. Victor Hovland and Collin Morikawa. We're looking at ball striking. We're looking at keeping it in the fairway. We're looking at good approach. I don't mind starting my two big horses in the 9K range as opposed to the 10K range. So, Joel, it's your pick. But before we get there, give me a yes or no on Collin.
That's a tough one for me. I'm in between. I think I'm a yes for Collin in a GPP or a big tournament. I'm going to be a no in a cash game or a smaller tournament.
And Spencer, commentary on Collin before we get to Joel's pick.
I think that's a very fair assessment that Joel just gave there. Like, I'm not going to play him for cash for a plethora of reasons. I mean, we can even date back to the back spasms that he had there, which seems to hopefully be a thing of the past for him right now. But I am not a Collin Morikawa person. I always say that. My model, anytime he cracks the top 10 for me, I always take note of it because I don't anticipate him being there. And for him being top 10, I think that's intriguing enough to where he should certainly be in consideration for a player pool.
We have a question from Daniel, is it Conyor, who I know watched me earlier on the early wedge. You're asking about the Eckroat versus sub bet. That's at Caesars, by the way. It's real quick, Spencer, at Caesars, that bet is Eckroat minus 130 over Justin Suh. Are you a yes or no on that one?
I would be
or out.
No, I would lean the Eckroat side.
Yeah. And Joel, how about you?
Eckroat.
Okay. Joel, it is your pick. What you got after the king, Scottie Scheffler?
All right. Well, I think my strategy for playing Scheffler this week is going to be maybe one other guy that's kind of in the 8-9K elite range, and I'm going to be pretty bounced off here. I don't need to dip too low. I think someone that's probably going to be chalky in the 6K range, whose ball striking has just been elite, is Mark Hubbard. I mean, he has been playing great golf. He's another one that seems like a mispricing in terms of how they've priced him.
Totally.
To get him in the 6K range with how good his ball striking has been, and to be able to pair him with obviously the most expensive player in the field helps me kind of manage building out the rest of this squad.
I agree that he's mispriced. Spencer, you usually have this sort of readily available. What should Mark Hubbard be priced according to your model? Do you have that readily available?
If you give me 1 second, I can tell you.
Go ahead.
It's going to be high. 8,100.
Jesus. Is that probably one of the biggest discrepancies on the slate for the Travelers?
That would be the biggest discrepancy that I have on the slate.
Wow. I mean, that tells you all you need to know. And because he's in the 6K range, listen, he's going to pick up some ownership, but the 6K guys never get like super high owned. So that's kind of the good news. For some reason, we look at like 7,000 and it's a line of demarcation between that and everybody else below it. But like, that's really just kind of like super arbitrary, obviously. But because of that, we're probably not going to see Mark Hubbard at like 10%. So, I mean, I think that's the good news there. I could be wrong, but I don't think it's going to trend that high. I'm a fan of that pick quite a bit. In fact, I think I have him in the top 40 market. Spencer, you got back-to-back picks. Patrick Cantlay starts. Who do we got next?
I will say I'll take the over of Mark Hubbard of 10%. I think Mark Hubbard is going to be I would not be shocked if he approaches like 15%.
Wow.
I'm kind of happy that Joel did it because I was going to probably do it. And I'm not even meaning that in the bad way. I didn't necessarily want to start the lineup the way that I was going to start it. I'm going to take Jon Rahm with this pick. And I don't think I needed to do this. I just want to lock it in just as like, if this is the way that I'm building it, I'm going to take Rahm and build it. I think a very common way that people might think is a Cantlay Rahm and then Hubbard becomes very simple to fit into the mix there. I think that's too common of a build, which is more of the reason why I talked about not wanting Hubbard in this particular way that I'm doing this. But Rahm was the golfer that I was talking about earlier, where I think we've hit this weird moment with him right now to where he's not getting the credit that he deserves. Like, the form is not exactly what you want. It's not Scottie Scheffler of what he's producing, but he made a run on Sunday at the US Open. I think the ownership is lower than it should be. I think from an upside number, he's probably the second best play on the board from a win equity sense. I think Patrick Cantlay is going to be very close to that, but I'll take two of my three win equity options and kind of just figure it out from there. This is not the route that I planned on taking, but there's enough ways in this $6,000, lower $7,000 range, and it's not even necessarily through chalk, that I think I can get different enough and still have enough players to hopefully try to round this out.
Yeah, and before you pick your next guy, and for the record, I was debating between Colin Morikawa and Jon Rahm. And part of the reason I was willing to go a high 9K guy and potentially Jon Rahm or even Scottie Scheffler, because I would have done that, I actually like the 6K range quite a bit. And so I'm going to be willing to go into the 6K range, maybe more this week than I normally would. I'm usually like not afraid to go in that range for better or for worse, but long story short, I think there's a lot. And part of the reason I don't think Hubbard is going to get to, let's say, 10, 12% is because there's a lot, like in my opinion, between like 6,500 and 6,900, I think there's a lot of guys that people are going to be somewhat interested in. So I think it's a good time to like load up on top and get a couple 6K guys in your lineup. If you're ever going to do that, I think this is the tournament to do it. Is that where you're going next? Because you do need a money saver player. Are you doing that now, Spencer?
I'm not going to do it yet. I'm going to go more in the middle, kind of with the budget that I have. And I am going to take Andrew Putnam at 7,200. I love where his game is trending. Unfortunately, I had him last week for a top 40 at the US Open at plus 225. He bogeyed the final, I believe, 3 holes to end up missing out on that total. So I didn't get there last week. I think a top 40 at plus 165 is another very intriguing way to consider him, but good course history here. the putter, the around the green game, the driving accuracy that he brings to the table, his bogey avoidance on some of these longer holes. He is the safest player that I have in my model of a guy who's 100-1 or longer in this tournament. I think that's a really nice answer to be able to say that he's being paired next to a Cantlay and a Rahm type player. I see about 6 to 7% ownership on him. That's pretty popular for a lower $7,000 golfer, but I like the safety that he is at least on paper bringing here.
Yeah, I think Putnam's a great play for all the reasons that you mentioned. Joel, it's your pick. You can feel free to comment on Putnam as to whether you're fading him or not, but I certainly think 7,200 is a pretty great price on him. Where are you going with your next pick? And of course, if you have a comment on Putnam, feel free.
Yeah, I'm not overly high on Putnam. I like Putnam. I think for the reasons that Spencer said. Sometimes I'm just concerned about how much his upside is, and if he can get top 15 or 20, which is kind of what you need. But I think from a smaller tournament and a safety perspective, at 7,200, I think is a great pick.
All right. Where are you going after Hubbard and Scheffler?
So with my pick here, I'm going with someone who probably has the best course history here in the field, and that's Brian Harman. Brian Harman has, in his last 5 tries, he's got 4 top 10s on this course. And, while his recent results haven't been as good as we would have liked out of him, the ball striking has been there. I mean, he gained 4 strokes on approach at the U.S. Open. Things got away from him at the Memorial. But before that, at the Charles Schwab, he gained 3. At the PGA, he gained 2. So with the ball striking there, I have confidence in his around the green game and his putting. And to get him back on a course that he's comfortable, that he, really performs well at historically, I think this is a really good spot at 7,500 to pick a player with some real upside.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, listen, I'm not a Harman guy, so I don't think I'm going to be playing much of him. Do you guys know what the ownership is looking like for Brian Harman currently?
Yeah, I see 11.7%.
Yeah, I wonder if that's going to grow a little bit. Whatever. I mean, it's not like anything completely out of control, but because of his course history, I expect that to tick up a little bit as the next 24 hours roll. I'm probably just going to be looking to pivot off of him, but he does look like a pretty safe option. I got to admit. Spencer, are you a yes or no on Brian Harman?
Joel, you and I can call a truce on this now. I mean, if any person that is a friend of Brian Harman is a friend of mine.
All right. I think I'm going chalk with my next pick, knowing that there's a good chance I'm going to go like crazy in the 6K range with 1 or 2 players. I don't think I can pass this guy up. This is like your classic 7K chalk, though. This is like the Mito Pereira situation all over again, where you see the metrics and you see the upside and you're like, man, how can I pass this guy up? But I'm going to do it anyway because I think my lineup's going to be different enough. I got to think, Spencer, there's a pretty big discrepancy in your model with this guy's price too, other than the fact that he's relatively new to the tour. So maybe that hasn't been baked in as much as it should. But speaking of ball striking, holy smokes, Austin Eckroat at 7,300. I mean, he is just crushing it off the tee, on approach. His short game hasn't been bad either. I think there's actual, and by the way, he contended in a tournament. I'm trying to remember which one it was, but it was just a few tournaments ago where he was playing on Sunday and he was sort of in the conversation. So again, he's going to be chalky. It's 7K chalk. It's the classic stuff you want to stay away from, but I don't mind having one chalky 7K guy in my lineup if the rest is going to be different. So just keep that in mind. Joel, yes or no on Austin Eckroat as we wait for the audience to nominate 2 guys?
Definitely, yes. I think he's one of my favorite value plays. He's playing great. You get him at 7,300. I was planning to take him with one of my next picks, so I definitely like him.
And Spencer, was I right about the discrepancy? 7,300, he should be higher?
I had him proper at 77, but that's taking the overall look of it. Like if I ran this more from a safety answer, you could bump that up a couple $100 more. Like he could be a real fringe 8,000 type golfer here.
Gotcha. It looks like Chez Reavie and Ludwig Aberg have been nominated and ratified. I actually kind of like those picks. I don't know that I'm going to be on Ludwig this week, although I don't have a problem with him. I like Chez Reavie quite a bit. I like his price. I like his history. I like his recent form. It's not amazing, but he's getting it done. He's finding a way to finish decent. Chez Reavie, I think, is going to be a topic of conversation just because he's one of those guys in the upper 6K range that clearly has, like you talked about, great course history with Brian Harman, Joel. I mean, I think Chez Reavie is at least the 6K version, which is going to be lesser, right, of Brian Harman. So, I mean, I think there's something to be said. If you think course history is sticky and all that stuff, he seems like a great play. So, Joel, real quick, Reavie, did you notice him? I mean, you were looking at course history this week. Is this somebody that you were going to incorporate, or did the metrics kind of throw you off a little bit?
I like Chez for the 6K range. If you're going to play someone at the 6.7, he's one of those guys I would look to. But I am going to try and avoid going that low as much as possible. But with some of those lines where you do cram in Schauffele and some of these studs, I'll have some shares of Reavie as well.
All right. So I think, and Spencer, I want to ask you, either of Aberg or Reavie, like either of those guys, would they be in your player pool?
I was going to take Aberg with my next selection. As far as Reavie is concerned, I have kind of large concerns about him solely because of the ownership. Like with Hubbard, I am more willing to eat the chalk in that spot because of the upside. Maybe upside's the wrong word for Hubbard, but like the overall rank of him being inside the top 20 for me. Reavie doesn't have that same production. Like for Reavie, it comes down to like, he's safe in my model. He has good safety numbers. I hate low priced options that you're playing because of safety. I just think that that's where it runs into problems more so than anything else.
That's totally fair. What's also totally fair is I'm going to take one of my favorite guys. At least lately, he's been one of my favorite guys. And he's 6,500. And he missed the cut at the U.S. Open. Wasn't very good at all. But that was the U.S. Open. And his name is Carson Young. He's always in the mid 6K range. And listen, he's been, other than the U.S. Open, he's been making cuts. I think 3 of his previous 4. He seems to me like a guy that honestly probably should be 7,100. And I'm going to take the value here. The ball striking is great. When you look at greens in regulation, tee to green, it's all very good. The putter's okay. Around the green, it has been an issue for him. But I think this is value here. And I like sort of the fact that, Carson Young can be popular. After a few weeks where he had his run, he was trending to some degree, but no, I don't see any ownership. Like I can't wait to see Stephen Pilardi's article tomorrow at WinDailySports.com because there's so many guys I'm really curious about, not in the upper range, because I think we have a really good idea of, where the chalk is going to be in the 10K range, the 9K, 8K, even the 7K range. We know who some of those chalky guys are going to be, like your Russell Henleys of the world. But I wonder if any of these guys are going to get more ownership. I'm seeing Carson Young at like 1%. Like I'll take that because I think he's a good golfer and he gives me tremendous sort of pricing leverage. So I'm in on that. Real quick, yes or no before we get to Joel's pick. Spencer, yes or no on Carson?
Like I kind of prefer this $6,000 route over the Reavie answer there. Like I'd rather take the upside shots with a Carson Young, a Ben Griffin, and Andrew Novak. I think those are better names to where, what is Reavie's upside really at this point? And I know I'm saying that as somebody who took Putnam, where I agree with Joel. Like I don't know what his upside necessarily is either, but we're also not talking about a $6,000 chalk option that might push 10%.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Joel, it is your pick. Give us your pick and just give us a yes or no on Carson.
Yes on Carson. And just quickly, I do want to add, Carson's a guy that's getting underpriced every week. He is just better than this range. And so right now, until they adjust, I agree. He seems to be a guy that you should continue to plug and play at 6,500. And I'm going to go with another guy that's a similar kind of story. He's continually getting underpriced every week. And he's getting disrespected. And I think it's because he's not a known name commodity in the golf space. And he's just coming onto the scene this year. So people haven't fully come around to it, but the results are there. And they've been there now consistently for the last couple of months. And that's Eric Cole. He has just been playing spectacular golf. To get him in the low 7K range is a misprice to me as well. Again, this is the type of guys I'm finding to pair with Scottie Scheffler where you can still get a competitive roster. So Cole was a easy choice for me here.
Yeah, Cole strikes me as one of those guys that's like kind of a gamer. Like he just shows up and figures it out and scores and just will score for your DK lineup. I will say this, like he's played so many tournaments in a row. And I don't know if there's any correlation, but the ball striking seems to be tailing off just a little bit. And again, there might be zero correlation to him playing. But it's just something to consider, like, for those of you that are looking at modeling and take a look at, because it almost seems weird to me that Eric Cole's playing so well given his metrics. The metrics aren't bad at all. I think maybe we might start to see a dip with Eric Cole. I don't know that it starts this week, but I just think it's something to at least look out for. Spencer, yes or no on Cole? And then you got 2 picks to give us.
I almost want to say no because it's his 9th consecutive start. I think statistically, Eric Cole is a really good golfer. Like what he is producing, it does not seem like a flash in the pan situation. Joel has also done a good job. Like when you look at Harman and Cole, like if I'm looking at $7,000 golfers, they're the 3rd and 4th best as far as value goes in the $7,000 range. So, I mean, Joel's obviously added a bunch of nice value to his team. I guess like the only negative would be ownership plus a lot of starts, but that hasn't stopped him recently. He's still been good.
Yeah, very true. All right, Spencer, you've got 2 picks. You got Cantlay and Rahm to start, which is pretty awesome. You got Andrew Putnam. Who's next?
I mean, unfortunately, now it gets gross kind of fast. Like I would have liked Aberg. I would have considered Eric Cole. I don't know if I would have gone down that route and actually done it, but you reach a certain point where the value just becomes too good to pass up when you're trying to compare him to other names here. I guess with the first name, I'm really surprised at the ownership that I see on him. I know the form looks absolutely atrocious. We can date this back to the Byron Nelson. It's just kind of bad all the way through with it. But I mean, there's a reason why this guy, whether it's you, Sia, or it's Nick, or whoever the person was, I know it wasn't me, whoever called him TPC Lee first. I mean, we're at a TPC property. He grades well in my model. You get a lot of those upside metrics that I'm talking about with the weighted tee to green season improvement, the specific surface we see an improvement. The TPC properties, he's inside the top 30. He's a good par 5 scorer. You only have 2 here, but I think it's important to score. And then he gets this jump in weighted proximity. So I like KH Lee. I love the ownership that we have. I worry about the overall safety that he brings to the table. But like to me, this is a good way to try to at least take a shot here. He's icy 2.5% right now. We've seen him pop at TPC properties before. I assume most people aren't going to like him, but that kind of comes with the territory where like he's 2% owned. Nobody's playing him. Like I kind of understand. And anybody who doesn't like the KH Lee play, trust me, the next play is getting worse than that.
Can't wait. What's next?
All right. So I'm going to start with KH Lee there. And then I am going to go up on the price scale to a golfer that is even more volatile right now with some of the production that he has put together. 2 missed cuts in the past 3. Don't necessarily think he's looked great either, but I like him at these short courses. I like him on this green type. He has a lot of the same upside metrics that I talked about with KH Lee. Seamus Power, 7,400.
Yeah, I took a look at Seamus Power when I started my research, Sunday night. And for whatever reason, I sort of looked off of him. And I don't know if it was just my bias, like I just don't play Seamus Power. Can you sell us on Seamus Power?
Low ownership. I mean, I think that's a really good start to it. The course history, everybody's always so into course history. And we're talking about a golfer that's made 4 consecutive cuts here in his 4 tries, including back-to-back top 25 finishes. You have the boomer bust nature, which you have to worry about a little bit, but the boomer bust answer isn't quite so bad when we're talking about sub 5% with the ability to be able to putt on these greens, with the ability. He's 4th in my model in strokes gained total at short courses. That's where the upside, and I think sometimes, and this goes for everybody in the space, like I think we get a little too reliant on either course history, and it just so happens in this case, like nobody's recognizing the course history, so it plays to my benefit, like to try to attack them there, since we know this is a pronounced venue that does return course history here. I just think that some of the times the current form gets marginally overweighed. Like I would not think of a US Open or some of these other venues as necessarily the best. Like I had a top 40 on Seamus last week. I'm not saying that it was a bad tournament for Seamus, but this is a much different feel of a tournament for him. That's a much better course fit. I don't necessarily want to overweigh some of these recent miscuts that he's put together. Like there's enough data that likes the upside that he presents. He's not overly grading on my model to where it's like all of a sudden he's popping off the page, but he's top 40 or fringe 40 in a lot of these names, a lot of these sections that I'm looking at, where when I have started so aggressively at the top, like you kind of have to pick and choose your spots here. And it's a different build than I was expecting, because I was kind of anticipating going your route, Sia, to where, take a 9,000 or 10,000 or whatever it is, and then find a $6,000 golfer to open up salary to kind of jump back into a certain point into the 8,000s. I didn't go that route here. I kind of have a lot of these random $7,000 golfers, but I think Seamus has legitimate top 10 or 20 upside here. He also has a ton of missed cut potential, but you kind of have to weigh at the pros and the cons there.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, Joel, it's your pick. Before you make your pick, feel free. Just let us know. I mean, I think it makes sense that Cage Lee isn't in a lot of people's player pools, and I actually think it's a really smart play by Spencer, given his what he's been doing on TPC courses historically. But Cage Lee was pretty good not that long ago. You know what I mean? Like, he was on a nice little run. So on this particular course, I think Cage Lee can be just fine. I don't mind the power play. I don't think I'm going to play either of them, but I don't hate either of those plays. Joel, just give us a yes or no on those two and then tell us your pick. Oh, by the way, everybody in the chat, hit the like button and type in the chat real quick who you think is going to win the tournament before it gets to your nominations, because then that'll be confusing. Like button, who do you think is going to win the tournament?
I'll just add quickly, KT is a great example of a guy who maybe is not the safest, but does have upside. If he puts together a good week, he'll get you that top 10, that upside. That's what you're looking for in these GPPs. So from a tournament perspective, I like Lee. Power was a guy I looked by. I ended up not going with, but I think for the reasons Spencer stated, he's a guy that's going to be lower owned with upside. I think it does make sense here.
Yeah. All right, your pick.
For my pick here, I'm going to go with strategically with my higher priced pick first, knowing that that's who we see on the audience are going to be more budgeted toward. And that's the guy who's playing as well as almost anyone in the world right now. At a pretty discounted price, Tommy Fleetwood. I mean,
that's who I was taking. Nice pick.
What we're seeing from Tommy Fleetwood right now over the last couple of weeks, I mean, he's playing unreal. His ball striking, and Tommy Fleetwood's not necessarily known to be an elite ball striker, but the ball striking's been there. He's striking the heck of the ball, and he's a great short game. He's got a great putter. You can rely on that with Tommy. If you marry that with ball striking, it's really starting to feel like he's due for a win on the PGA Tour, and maybe it's this week.
Oh, man, my lineup was going to be really good with Tommy Fleetwood. I was going to get him. It would have left me with 7,500. I would have had a lineup, just so everybody knows. It would have been Victor, Colin, and Fleetwood, the two guys I have, Eckroat and Carson Young, with 7,500 to spare. I just think some of you should put that lineup in, is all I'm saying. I like Tommy Fleetwood. I'm not super psyched about playing him for some reason, and I think it's just because I plan on playing more of Colin and Hovland, but he's a great play in my opinion. Spencer, what about you? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he 7th in my model, 5th for safety. I much prefer him over some of these routes in the $9,000 section. Like, just to name a couple players, I know we try not to do it on this show, but like, I would rather play Fleetwood than Wyndham Clark. I think Wyndham Clark's going to be more popular. I'd rather play Fleetwood than Rickie Fowler. I don't think the ownership's going to be vastly different there. I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to do something crazy and just hope I get lucky with my last pick, because Joel ruined my plans. Listen, I think I had the winning team. This is why we love the Draftcast, right? He stole my player. He made the right strategic move because he saw how much money I had left and how much money the audience had left. And so, good pick. So you ruined my day. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just double down. You want to take a $9,300 Tommy Fleetwood? Well, I'm going to take a $10,400 Xander Schauffele. And I think it leaves me with 6,400. So that's why I kind of have to get lucky. I have a couple guys in mind, but I have a little bit of time before I make that pick. That's what I'm doing. Xander's the defending champion here. That doesn't mean a lot to me other than the fact that he's probably going to be motivated to show up. I mean, and I only say that because he's coming off kind of a bad weekend, US Open. He could be kind of, a little down. Maybe his foot is not on the pedal here, but because he's the defending champion, I think he is going to show up and play classic Xander Schauffele golf, which is really good, by the way. Great ball striking. I'm not too afraid of what happened with the driver on Saturday. I think he's still got plenty to prove. I don't expect him to win this tournament, but I like him in my lineup right here, even though he's super pricey. We're going to go to the audience. They're nominating right now, but yes or no on, again, I wasn't planning on taking him, full disclosure. I was going to take Fleetwood. So I'm not in love with this pick, but Spencer, yes or no on Xander Schauffele?
See, I think this is a really interesting game theory sort of a lineup that you've put together here, because if we want to say that Eckroat is too popular, which I mean, I think is a fair thing. Like, he's probably too popular on where he's at right now. all of a sudden when you go Xander, Hovland, Morikawa, like you've differentiated a lineup so much to when you can like get unique or play the chalk with Eckroat and that. So I think for your specific build, like I don't know how you're going to wrap this up.
Yeah.
I like your lineup. I just don't know what the last pick is, but I like the strategy. I think it's unique and different.
Yeah. I mean, I think listen, I got to get lucky with the 6K guy, but I think I have a ton of win equity locked up in at least 3 of these guys. And that's ultimately what I'm looking for. And I think there's really good made cut equity across the board until I get to my last pick. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. Rory's a loser, says Corey. That must be a D-Gen fan right there. D-Gen 75 fan. All right. Did you all nominate 2 guys already? I apologize. I haven't been paying attention to the chat. I see Ram. I see a lot of Rory and Tom Kim. Rory must have been one of the picks. Was it Rory and Tom Kim that the audience ultimately nominated here? I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Yep. Rory and Tom Kim. All right. What did that leave them with? Like 500 on the table?
Yeah.
I think this is a good lineup, guys. I really do. I mean, Tom Kim is going to be pretty popular along with Russell Henley. Decky's going to pick up some ownership. Aberg, though, not so much. There's a little chalkiness here, guys, but Rory's not particularly chalky. No, Rory's kind of like on the lower. I think this lineup is kind of great. Joel, what say you about Team Audience?
I like it. I think they put together a really good lineup. I think the thing that stood out to me, like you said, it does seem it might be a little chalky, but I think between Aberg, Reavie, maybe a little to a Reavie comes out as and Rory, they'll be okay. I like the lineup.
Yeah. Spencer, what do you think about the lineup as I stall?
I have higher ownership percentages on a lot of the players than everybody else might. So to me, the lineup is extremely chalky. I think there's ways to play the lineup the way that it is. And if you change Reavie for somebody else, I would like the lineup a lot more. So I guess like my answer, whether or not Reavie succeeds is another question. Like I'm not saying he's not going to, but I think if you get rid of Reavie and you replace him with somebody, that's an intriguing lineup where at least the audience grabbed a lot of the values. Like Henley's one of the better values. I think Hideki's a really good value. Aberg was a good value. Tom Kim started at like 70-1 and all of a sudden he's been bet all the way down. So obviously people think he's a good value. Not necessarily on Rory this week. Don't hate the play, but I think it's a fine lineup, just a little too chalky for me.
And I am out of time. I was going to take Lucas Glover because his ball striking has been great. We know the story on Lucas Glover is he just can't putt. And then I was going to take Tyler Duncan. It just has not been good for Tyler Duncan, but he does have decent history here. I can't go Tyler Duncan. So I think I'm going to go. I got to check one other guy. Somebody tell a joke or something. I'm going to check Adam Long because I haven't looked at him and he seems like he might be a decent option. No, he's not. All right. So it's 6,400. I'm going to go with my gut. I am going to go with, ouch, this is going to hurt, Robbie Shelton. Robbie Shelton at 6,400. Listen, he's one of those guys that I feel like, I don't want to say like hit or miss because the hit's going to be, not great, but like we've seen Robbie Shelton flash here and there for 4 rounds, not so much. So you're just kind of hoping Robbie Shelton flashes for 2 rounds, right? He makes the cut, doesn't do too much damage to your lineup on Saturday and Sunday. I mean, guys, any thoughts, Joel? I'll go to you first. I mean, Robbie Shelton, does it inspire any confidence whatsoever?
Well, I mean, he's not in my player pool, but for someone being stuck in that range and trying to find someone that you can fit into your lineup, I like Robbie Shelton of the choices that you had.
Yeah, it honestly, James Hahn would have been the other direction I would have gone. Maybe Scott Stallings because he's actually got some decent history here too. But Spencer, any thoughts on Robbie Shelton?
If I was in your spot there where I was forced into a 6,400 or less player, it probably would have either been Robbie Shelton or Lanto Griffin.
Oh, Lanto's down there. I didn't even see him. All right. Well, then I feel like kind of okay about the Robbie Shelton pick. Joel, you've got 1 pick left. By the way, when we finish here, for those of you that are new to the show, we do our first round leaders, which we hit again last week. So stay tuned for that. We're going to bring the board down. We're going to do 2 minutes worth of first round leaders, and then we're going to get out of here. Joel, who do you got for your last pick?
All right. Well, I'm excited about my last pick. I'm going to take a player who is going to leave $500 on the table for me. I'm not going to use all my salary. I'm going to take Christian Bezaden, who, in my opinion, has been playing really well this season. And because the field is pretty loaded, I think Xander has a ton of upside. I've actually already made an outright bet on him, and it's my biggest outright bet of the year.
Wow.
At 250 to 1.
Wow. Strong words. All right, Spencer, any thoughts on Seabez before you give your last pick?
I do kind of have some reasonably good thoughts on him here. So I talk a lot about recalculated numbers and how I run course specific data for these venues. Any random course out there, Bezaden had 86th in strokes gained tee to green. You put him on this course for me, 16th overall. It's the biggest jump I had in my entire model.
Wow, that is very interesting. Very interesting. All right, Joel's smiling. Spencer, you got one pick left before we do our first round leaders. Cage Lee, Seamus Power, 2 plays that I don't think a lot of people are going to have in their player pool, which makes your lineup very tournament worthy. Who's going to finish it off?
I saw that Ed asked about Hostler.
Yes.
Like to me, this comes down to either Hostler or probably Brendan Todd. I feel like I always go the Brendan Todd route and I never play Hostler. And anytime I've ever used Hostler for one of these builds, he has missed the cut. Like it's been without question with it. I do think I'm going to go with him though. And it just comes down to me. Like it's another spot for me to grab exposure. I have Hostler in a head-to-head matchup against Sam Stevens this week. I grabbed that at -115. I'm more so out on Stevens than I am in on Hostler, but you know, Hostler's weighted proximity is going to be bad no matter where you put it, but that's almost a good thing. Like, yeah, you have this concentrated data that comes in from 125 to 175 at this course. Some players like Stevens get worse. Some players like Hostler are just bad everywhere. And with him being bad everywhere, that's not even a negative. It's like he has the putter, he has the around the green game. He's not going to necessarily have those problems. And he has such a good around the green game that on these smaller than average greens, I'm hoping that he'll be able to scramble if everybody is missing greens in regulation here. I don't necessarily love this pick. It's not the route I was planning to go. I would make an argument that my model thinks Brendan Todd is the play here, but I don't know. See, this is a very weird lineup that I was not anticipating.
Well, last week we weren't anticipating a lot of the players on our squads either, and that turned out really well for pretty much all of us. So, listen, this is a very unique build. I mean, plain and simple. Cantlay, Rom, Putnam, I mean, those aren't super unique, but the last 3 really are. So if those 3 guys end up making the cut and popping, then that lineup, you know, to the moon potentially. So I like the construction regardless. I think it's time, Joel.
Let's do it. I'm going to bring the draft board down. While I do so, feel free. Let's see it said. Hit the like button. Give us a follow. We'll be posting the lineups on Twitter. Let us know whose lineup you think is going to win. We'll come back and recap it, and we're going to talk smack as we always do, but we're not done yet. We still have our first round leader market, which is going to be an especially exciting one this week because there's some really long odds guys that frankly have a shot. So let's get right into it, Spence. Who are you looking at in the first round leader market?
So I didn't go all the way down the board here. I did take a specific strategy that I was trying to look for. I wanted these high-end golfers that had drifted too far down the board, in my opinion. That would be a Tony Finau for me at 45 to 1, Sung Jae Im at 60 to 1. Those are the only 2 first-round leader bets that I have at this point. I do think you can go deeper than that, but like, I mean, like the one thing to me is this is a designated event. It doesn't mean that somebody can't pop for one day, but there's a lot of names here. I don't know. I mean, this isn't like the tournament, and Sia is going to give us the winner here in a second. So we'll hear what Sia has to say, but I'm not looking to be overly exposed for my first round leader card.
I like
it. And for the record, I think because there are a lot of guys, especially in the morning, if that ends up being the advantage, that are super long. I mean, you could really just like sprinkle like half of what you would normally put on the first round leaders and just on some of those long shots or some of those guys, Spencer, to your credit, that drifted down the board, and that would be like a huge payout. So just something to consider. Like, obviously you don't want to ever put too much money in the first round leader market unless it's for the lock button pick. But I just wanted to point that out. There are a lot of long odds guys that you can just literally put a few bucks on, and it can return you like $350, $400. Something to think about.
Yeah, and I think that's the exciting part about a week like this with some of these super long odds is you can sprinkle a few bets and a couple bucks, and all of them will be a fun win because of the numbers. So my first one, I already talked about and mentioned Seabez at 130 to 1. Another guy I drafted, obviously I like my guys this week, Brian Harman at 70 to 1. He likes the course, certainly a place where he can heat up. And then as we go up, kind of the more to the favorites, I'm going to mention Max Homa at 55 to 1. Obviously, his game's not in a great place, but 55 is a pretty long number for someone of his talent. And my last play is going to be Tom Kim at 50 to 1.
Homa fits that general narrative that I was talking about with Sung Jae and Finau. It's just these guys that have drifted a little bit too far for their talent level.
Exactly.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm debating my lock button between two guys, and one of them really fits that profile, Spencer, quite well. So maybe I'll end up deferring to him. So I'll start with my long shot guys. Austin Eckroat at 75 to 1. Lee Hodges at 100 to 1. Andrew Putnam at 100 to 1. Shez Reavie at 110 to 1. So these are like obviously extreme long shots. This is what I was talking about. You could literally put a couple bucks and it would be a huge payout. I almost put Kevin Streelman in there at 130 to 1. So just kind of consider that. Since we're taking so many long shots anyway, you can obviously take more players if they're like at triple digit odds than you would if you're taking guys that are 20 to 1 and 30 to 1. So Eckroat, Hodges, Putnam, Reavie, consider Streelman if you feel like it. But the lock button play, which we hit last week. I mean, everybody here watched the show last week, right? You heard what I said about Xander Schauffele. I literally said it was the lock button play. And he had to share with Rickie. But Xander doesn't mind sharing. I don't mind sharing. 35 to 1 became 1750 to 1, whatever. I'll take it. This week, if we split, it's going to be right around that 35 to 1 range because this guy who has been hot and who has shaken off a neck injury is going to be your first round leader at the Travelers. No, it's not Matthew Fitzpatrick. It's Hideki Matsuyama. At 55 to 1, he will be your first round leader at the Travelers. It's Tuesday, so we're telling you, we're not predicting the future. We're telling you the future. Your first round leader at the Travelers, 2023. It's going to be Hideki Matsuyama, 55 to 1. Book it. Let's go.
See, some would say you actually, for this tournament, traveled in time to tell you who the first. So there you go. It's on brand, on theme with the Travelers tournament. That's what we do for you.
Wow.
Put it in, lock it in, come back Thursday night. We'll celebrate our winnings. We'll count our cash. It's another fun tournament. We are in the swing of things for PGA season, prime season, when the picks are hot, when we got things flowing. It's time to get on board. We got there this week. See, what am I missing?
You're missing the ownership article tomorrow at WinDailySports.com. Also below this, whatever you're watching this on, right below the screen is a link to our giveaway. It's a giveaway for a year of gold membership access to WinDailySports.com. And that's not just for golf, right? That's for football season, which is coming up in like 75 days. And every other sport we do, MLB, NBA, hockey, like literally you name it, we do it. So click on that link. I know David tweeted something out, the Win Daily Sports Twitter account, David Bileski's Twitter account. I retweeted it. So you can find it on Twitter as well. Just retweet it, follow David, and you'll be in the drawing. Other than that, I can't wait for the ownership article. I can't wait for all the picks that we're going to put into the Win Daily Sports Discord. And there might be a weather edge. So that's something that we're going to talk about tomorrow night in the Win Daily Sports Discord. The only other thing that I forgot is, what is it again? Oh, that's right. It's sport.